identified at that moment 12 sectors that was felt would be reserved for local players, looking at various decision matrices, which included the investment required, the complexity, the technology issues. And the following were identified, and an act was put in place to reserve it for our indigenous Zimbabweans. Transportation, that was passenger buses, taxis, and car hire services. Retail and wholesale trade. Barber shops, hairdressing, and beauty salons. Employment agencies, estate agencies, valet services, grain milling, bakeries, tobacco grinding and packaging, advertising agencies, provision of local arts, craft and marketing and distribution, and final artisanal mining. So those were the 12 sectors that were reserved for indigenous purposes. But eventually, as time moved, we started engaging with the local business who were saying, okay, we think that there's a requirement for addition of other sectors. And the Ministry of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion, through Finance Act number 2 of 2024, amended the Indigenization and Economic Empowerment Act to include 5 more sectors at the request of the Zimbabwean business. And these sectors were added eventually. That is the haulage and logistics industry. And this was in response to ZITA. There is also pharmaceutical retailing, shipping and forwarding, customs and clearing, and borehole drilling. So these were added as a result of the government responding to our indigenous business people. It is important to highlight that the Finance Act number 2 of 2018, which added the reserved sectors to the Indigenization and Economic Empowerment Act, also provided for the Minister of Industry and Commerce to come up with regulations that set thresholds for companies wishing to operate in those reserved sectors. And these regulations have been so far been done, and I'm pleased to note that it will be part of a statutory instrument that follows. As you are aware, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, regulations come to help implementation of specific acts.
Your attention, the attention of the President and all the pillars of government and this Parliament Portfolio Committee before we are reduced to beggars in our own country. We would like to thank Honorable Karikoga, Chairman of the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Transport, who agreed to meet us as bona fide indigenous Zimbabwean businessmen in transport industry. Challenges facing the indigenous transporters. Challenges facing the transport and haulage industry are genuine and clear to any Zimbabwean businessmen and women. Please note that the challenges emanated from genuine policies that sought to uplift the lives of the Zimbabweans, but investors took advantage of the opportunities presented and they elbowed Zimbabweans who are now facing extinction in their own country. This was compounded by the fact that the transport and haulage sector was not reserved for Zimbabweans. Our investors started importing trucks and tippers in large quantities, currently estimated to be around 5,000, owned by the following companies. I will not bother to read out the companies. When you get the copies, you will see the names of the companies that are cited: Manhize, Transport, Siachi, Hazel, and the like. But there are 32 cited here, but we know that there are more than 32. The indigenous transporters cannot compete against these investors because of the following reasons. Investors access financing of loans from international banks in China at very low interest and zero deposits, on the acquisition of trucks and trailers, back-to-back contracts with international players, duty-free benefits on trucks brought in as goods of capital nature into Zimbabwe, tax benefits for the first 5 years. The investors do not make money on transport because they can afford to load, to run to Beira loaded and come back empty, to load again continuously. This obviously shows that our investors make money on mineral exports. However, please note that our investors are now strongly encroached in the transportation of mineral exports, which ordinarily should be transported by Zimbabwean transporters. Our investors are doing everything for themselves: mining, transportation, and even the transportation of their raw materials from Beira port to mining sites scattered across the country. We believe that investors should create employment for locals. Creating loads for the local transporters, hence expanding business opportunities, indirectly creating employment for locals. Now, the transport and the haulage sector is reserved for locals. There is nothing left for the locals in this industry. We, as an association of Zimbabwe Indigenous Transporters, do not agree with the joint press statement of the Minister of Industry and Commerce and the Minister of Transport and Infrastructure Development of the 21st of March 2025 that suggests that, I quote, investors operating in the haulage and logistics industry are urged to lodge applications with the Minister of Industry and Commerce, illustrating how their business meet or intend to meet the criteria and threshold prescribed in terms of Section 3A of the updated 2021 of the Indigenization and Economic Empowerment Act, Chapter 1433. This government has a responsibility to protect its citizens for the emancipation of its citizens, even if an intended good had worked against the aspirations of its intended good intentions. Our investors should be engaged to correct the unfair competition and the imbalance by creating a soft landing for our investors. And this should involve government as the custodians of the law of this country. Regulating the current status quo is tantamount to the continuity of unfair business practice, using a law that can be amended to protect the future and citizens of this country. We need investors in this country, but we should not be afraid to correct unforeseen anomalies. We opened the floodgates and forgot to put controls. Please note that transport rates have been reduced to uneconomic rates, further deepening our crisis. The result is that transporters fail to repair broken down trucks, fail to pay license fees and the exemption fees if the need arises. The average acceptable rate for local rates, Harare to Bulawayo, should be about 13 cents per ton per kilometer, while Harare to Beira rates should be an average of $2.10 per running kilometer. This requires Parliament to regulate transport rates to protect the local industry. This is against the background of very bad roads which have been run down in such areas as Sandawa, Mvurwi, Mtorashanga, Guruve, and this is notwithstanding the damage to the ecosystem in the areas mentioned above. We advocate for 70% of all imports and exports loads coming out of Manhize, Bikita, Bindura, Lalapansi, Mtorashanga, Mvurwi, Zvishavane, Sandawana, and Kamati. I underscored this next statement. We appeal to ZITA and the Minister of Transport and the Minister of Industry and Commerce, please close the gates No more trucks and trailers should be allowed into the country imported by investors currently in the transport and haulage industry illegally. For the sake of peace, we shall not mention names of the company that imports the red trucks in huge numbers, taking advantage that they have valid operators' permits. We beg the authorities to stop the imports. We hope this meeting will not seek to explain technicalities that seek to perpetuate the flooding of investors' trucks by either using proxies, special permits, bilateral agreements, denigrating the protection of Zimbabwean business people. In conclusion, we seek to meet the President, His Excellency Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa, because nyika inovakwa nevene vayo. In conclusion, we appeal to Professor Mtuli Ncube. Zinara compliance fees, penalties and exemption fees are killing our industry. We appeal to parliamentarians and honorable members in this House to fight our war. Repetitive licenses are negatively contributing towards the unsustainable overhead costs for our companies and industry at large. This submission is from the Zimbabwe Indigenous Road Transporters Association, ZITA. Thank you.
You mentioned investors. It's foreign transporters, because that's the prayer of your petition against foreign transporters. Is there anything else that you may need to add?
Thank you very much for this opportunity again. The panel in front of close to me here will in a few minutes just...
Given the fact that we were recently reserved, we have the right to remain reserved, and any operator who had already encroached into the sector needs to find an exit package, because there is no reason why we should be competing with them as investors. If they have money for trucks, I'm sure they have money for mineral beneficiation, which aligns with the country's beneficiation process. In addition, there is no value that we are obtaining as locals in terms of CSR, infrastructure development, because you look and you go and tour in various constituencies, these investors, foreign transporters or investors, they have taken advantage of us, that they are doing the whole value chain from mining to importation, clearance and everything. There is no longer scope of employment for us as locals. They are invading our economic space. And to add on to that, they come in and smuggle and externalize, because they offer each other back-to-back offshore agreements as countrymen. So if they have that money, would maybe seek the parliamentary committee to aid in investing in other sectors that critically need this money. Because a fleet of 100 trucks is not cheap. It's a multi-billion investment which could be channeled to other sectors of the economy that need such funding. And as locals, we've got the capacity to actually move this cargo locally, and here's the reason why it was taken for us to be into the reserve sector. So in short, this is just the summary presentation which I have to share with the committee. Thank you.
Broke. All the transporters we are seeing, they are broke. We can't even compete with those foreign transporters, because they have got a wide range of advantages with them. Look, they come, they pretend as if they are investors, whilst they are transporters. They are transporting the raw materials and the extracted minerals from whichever area they are mining or they are working with their own transport, whilst we understand that us as indigenous people, we should also benefit by being employed by them, also by them taking our trucks as we are also business people. We are even in a very, very bad state at our homes there. Mind you, you might not know, we are not even able to send our children to schools. We are not even able to pay for them, for the school fees, for their food, for their health care. Why? Because the competition is too much wide. Why are we saying that? These investors, they come with brand new trucks from their countries, with all the maintenance kits, from tires, from spares, for free of duty. By so doing, they are charging rates according to themselves because they are carrying their own goods. Thereby, they are shouldering us out of the transport sector. So our appeal from today onwards is for this House to help us, please, to settle this anomaly by making sure that indigenous people will benefit from the things which they should benefit in their country. If investors are going to come, they have to come to invest in our country, not for them to benefit from what we should benefit as indigenous people. I thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Chandoda kutaura chekutanga ndechekuti ndinoda kuti dare rino rigoziva kuti transport in Zimbabwe, it's a multi-billion sector. It contributes a lot. Ndoda kutaura pamusoro pema-trucks ema-foreign, and I want to be open enough that the foreign we are talking about the Chinese and the Indians. I'm also going to njabata futhi ma-local, because to affect a local investor. Akafana ne national foods, akafana ne PEPs, akafana ne mega market, akafana ne ma-farmers, because tabatwa ma-rates ese, they are now distortion. Should be serious. Akusina chinchonzi Zimbabwe indigenous transporters. Pangosara foreign transporters. Ma foreign transporters atoda now ndekuti afaniri kunge atombori mu reserved sector. Reserved sector yakaitwa ku passengers is the same reserved sector yatirikuda ku haulage and logistics. We have noted kuti ma-China aya akauya muno achishanda muno. For good example, again, I'm going to talk about very few transporters, the history of very few transporters. We've what a company called Labaimon. Labaimon came to Zimbabwe and started operating Labaimon. By time goes on, he formed the Sandawa Logistics for the cousin. Then he also formed another Tosmart Logistics. He formed another company called Pacific Go, which is currently running right now. Then I come to Hezo Logistics. Hezo Logistics is for another foreign transporter. There's a guy who was working for Hezo Logistics who also formed, after quitting from Hezo Logistics, he formed OnTrans. Then from OnTrans, we also have a serious issue within ourselves as Zimbabweans. These foreign, they are coming to Zimbabwe, but we also have local who are fronting these people, who are manipulating the system of our economy. Those are the ones who are helping also. So you find out that these guys, these foreign transporters, they are very clever enough to come and look for a Zimbabwean to manipulate the system. At the end of the day, we end up suffering as Zimbabweans. Through to you, Chair, tinokumbira kuti mutibatsire munyika muno. Tikaenda ku national foods, ma local indigenous transporters ndo aitakura mu national foods. As we speak right now, we are banned to carry national foods because they've brought their own trucks. And remember, these are manufacturers. They are now doing distribution by themselves. They are now caring for themselves. If you go to Mega Market, we used to carry huge business from Beira to Mutare, but he now owns more than 800 trucks. He is now also a broker. If you want to carry minerals in Zimbabwe, you have to take your truck to Mutare to go in, to pick up a container to go and carry chrome in Korashanga. Is this realistic? But it's happening in Zimbabwe. We need a serious protection from the Honorable Member of Parliament. To consider Zimbabwe indigenous transporters to be the leading transporters in their own country, so that we help this economy. I thank you.
Makunditarisa kuti munhu uyu ari indigenous sei. So manje ndichatanga ipapo kuti moziva kuti ndiri indigenous sei. Mbuya wangu Soviet Tendere wakaroorwa neMindia, but inini ndiri mwana wejecha. Kumusha kwangu ndekugana nzara Rusape area, and that's why I joined the Indigenous Transporters Association of Zimbabwe. I would just like to make reference to the last speaker, where he spoke about mega market. I import my trucks from a company called Britcom, which is in the United Kingdom. In a meeting with the gentleman, when he was trying to convince me to import more vehicles, the conversation went about the 300 trucks that were imported by Mega Market. He told me that they were paid for those trucks, these Renault trucks that were imported, and they were paid directly out of the UAE for those vehicles. None of the payments came from within Zimbabwe and from Mega Market. When in our document we spoke about foreign investors, when we're speaking about foreign investors, it's because these people have come under the pretense of investing in the country and investing in the mining industry. But once they got here, they started backward integrating their businesses to the point where they're bringing in their own vehicles, transporting their own goods, where it even comes to the point where they're even bringing in shovels and wheelbarrows from China. Where does the local industry within this country benefit? Foreign investors come in, they invest in certain businesses, and whilst they invest in certain businesses, us as the local people within the country find employment, and our businesses operate, supplying the support that those industries need, like carrying their goods inside and outside of the country. So when we come here, we are here because we are fighting for survival. Mushona, there's a saying that says, "Mwana acheni mbereko anofa tatofa," and that's why we are crying here for you people to come forward and tell us what the way forward is. We take exception to the fact that the article that was read by our chairman that depicted the sector being reserved for Zimbabweans, and then says that anybody that has brought in vehicles can come and now legitimize it and regularize it. That does not mean that they need to leave the industry. That means that they just need to come and rectify and present themselves before our government in order for them to continue operating within Zimbabwe. We also take exception to the fact that us as transporters within this country are surviving on the profit made by our trucks. We as Zimbabweans cannot compete with these foreign investors or foreign transporters, whatever tag we give them, for the fact that they get financing out of China at much lower interest rates than we do. The lowest interest rate that we get is 18% from our financiers within Zimbabwe. We currently invest our money, they get untenured loans, they get extended times to be able to pay that. We are limited to a maximum of 3 years, especially with the 2030 article that said that after that we will be going back to a local currency. We also take exception with Zanara, and we take exception with Zanara on these points. Local transporters pay $20 at every toll gate for every 100 kilometers covered. Any vehicle, foreign vehicle that enters this country pays $10 for $100 covered. Why are we being punished yet we are Zimbabweans? Why are others benefiting from our country and we as Zimbabweans are not benefiting from the country? I also want to point out something where I feel that when people do things, they need to do things in a correct fashion. When our government changed our currency from ZWL to the ZIG currency, we were told to divide our ZIG by a rate of 2,498.35. Forgive me if I'm incorrect, it's been quite a while, I can't remember the exact figures. Once our monies that we had deposited with Zimra were divided by 2,498.35, let's just round it off to 2,500, that gave us 170 in the new currency per toll gate. Zanara didn't do it that way. Zanara went and rated their toll gate in a US dollar amount, then multiplied that US dollar amount by the going rate of the 295.80, and thus us as Zimbabwean transporters lost money that we had deposited with them for our toll gates. We come before this August meeting, and honorable members, to merely state a fact, and the fact is this here, is we have lost sight of what our liberation struggle was for. My grandmother used to listen in our lounge to, I think it was the Harare Mambos that used to sing, Mbuya neanda kuvawa chitaura shua, kuti tichatora sei nyika ino. We have taken the country, but it's not an old white colonial power that came with guns and weapons, but a new colonial power, and I call it neuro-colonialism, where they come and befriend us and take over our country whilst we are sitting and watching them. We put before this august house that you people look at this, that you people protect us as local Zimbabweans and protect the industries that you say are our industries for us. I close with that final word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Zimbabwe Indigenous Transporters Association, concerning the unfair competition that they were facing from foreign operators. We indeed responded positively by calling for dialogue with the executive, a meeting which was held on 3 February 2025. In attendance were the following organization: ZITA, the freight transport operators themselves, and the Ministry of Transport, the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. The meeting agreed on the following: that the two ministries of Transport and Industry and Commerce was going to issue a joint statement reminding the foreign investors to comply with the reserved sector regulations and regularize with the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. Secondly, the resolution that freight transport industry was asked to assist by proposing to the government a reasonable time period for the foreign investors to be given to comply with the regulations. The third proposal was that they also come up with mechanisms for them to be the first choice partners for the foreign investors when they disinvest. And lastly, that there be introduction of export incentives for transport operators who use locally registered transporters as a way of expanding opportunities for cross-border road transportation. The position of the ministry as it concerns the issue of smooth exit strategy for foreign operators. The ministry welcomes the proposals from the Zimbabwe Indigenous Transporters Association on the proposed exit strategy for foreign operators. However, we believe that a whole of government approach should be embraced to ensure that there is a smooth exit strategy for such operators. And the following are some of our recommendations. That there be an amendment of the country's procurement laws to favor indigenous players in the cross-border transport market, and the introduction of export incentives for transport operators who use locally registered vehicles. Financing arrangements for indigenous players to procure new fleets or duty exemption of brand new trucks and or their spares. That there be an amendment of the country's indigenous and economic empowerment laws, because, for example, in South Africa, freight operators cannot load ex-Sasol, which is one of the largest refineries of petrochemicals in the SADC, because of the requirement for a black economic empowerment compliance certificate, which automatically favors South African registered companies. That there be a policy review of payment of duty for fuel in transit, which policy would result in low business for Tenga indigenous freight operations. After this issue has now been escalated, and the Dr. here, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Industry, will agree that the issue only last week, I think it was on Tuesday or Wednesday, a working party met where this issue was debated, and I think the details, I would leave it to the Secretary for the Ministry of Industry to present.
Before I go into my prepared speech, I would like to just respond quickly to the dating timings. This plea has been made aware to us, I think since maybe early 2024. As Minister of Industry and Commerce, we engaged with them. They invited us to their meeting. We came, they talked of this same problem, and we agreed on a plan of action, which I believe is actually happening. The first one was to put haulage transport on the reserved sector. Honorable Chair, let me say, before the January, February 2024, haulage transportation was not on the list of reserved sector. So it was a free-for-all. It was only after ZITA engaged us and put up a business case why the fuel, the transportation, haulage transportation should be reserved for indigenous Zimbabwe. And the ministry, and using the whole of government approach, agreed and took measures. And those measures are progressing, from my view, very well, as indicated by the head of the Minister of Transport delegation. So if you may allow me, so that I can just put everything in perspective, I'll go